I do not remember my name, only the walls that breathe. The warp-wrecked corridors of the Wormwish pulse around me like something still alive, not in the way metal should remember its forging, but in the way a wound never forgets its blade. I was once flesh among many, a voice among chants, a servant among the damned. Now I walk alone, and the echo of that heretical choir has turned to silence so deep it shreds thought. Every footstep sounds like betrayal. You think it's glorious. The gift of the warp, the promise of chaos. You picture fire and fury, not hunger and rot. But you've never felt your skin itch from the inside. Never watched your shadow bend without you. Never whispered a prayer and heard something whisper back. Not words, but hunger. They say space hulks are tombs, but tombs do not scream when you sleep. Do not bleed when you scrape your hand along the bulkhead. Tombs are peaceful. This is something else. If I am lucky, this will be the last record. If I am not, then you'll hear more, but by then so will they. If this confession finds its way to any Vox node, any living ear, remember me. Share what I've seen. Subscribe to the dread I carry. Like the screams I've buried, let them echo. Let others know what waits inside the dark. I woke in silence so thick it pressed against my ears like a scream held underwater. The ship was wrong. That was my first thought. Not that I had survived, not that I still had limbs or breath or thought. Just that something about the Wormwish was wrong. The bulkhead above me wept with beads of red condensation like rust bleeding. Gravity had no loyalty. It pulsed in spasms. I was slammed against the grated floor one moment, then floating like an untethered prayer the next. There were no alarms, no klaxons, only the hum of ancient systems still running long after the souls that built them had vanished into the warp. I pulled myself up by the pipes, warm, wet. Breathing? No, couldn't be. Couldn't think that. Not yet. The corridor ahead was dark, but darkness wasn't new. We worshipped it once. I had painted the eye across my chest in sacred grease. I had lit the incense of rot. I had stood shoulder to shoulder with the faithful, voices raised in defiance of the golden throne. But now I couldn't even remember the words. I stepped forward, my boots squelched. The floor was carpeted in something soft and yielding. I didn't look. Some things you feel once, and once is enough. The walls shifted, pipes bent and straightened like ribs inhaling. A maintenance servo skull zipped past overhead, dragging a trail of Vox static like a whisper. Then it was gone. Had I hallucinated it? Or worse, was I meant to see it? The lights flickered. Long, stuttering gasps of half-dead lumen strips struggling to wake from centuries of sleep. That was when I saw the first body. No, not a body. A mural. Half a torso had been absorbed into the wall, arms spread, like a martyr crucified by the ship itself. His face, torn between agony and worship, stared back at me with eyes fused open. Runes were etched into his skin, glowing faintly with warp residue. I knew him. Garrick, devout, faithful, eager. We had shared rations once, laughed at the screaming psyker together. I did not laugh now. The ship had taken him, not as corpse, as memory. My stomach growled. I had no food, no pack. My robe was torn, its symbols faded to smears. My auto pistol was gone. Maybe it had never been real. Maybe I had traded it for a dream back on Malfi. Or maybe I'd simply left it behind while running from something I couldn't remember. Either way, I had nothing but my breath, and even that felt borrowed. I passed a ventilation duct. It hissed once, then spoke, or something inside it did. A soft childlike giggle, then silence, then a slow scraping sound like fingernails across wet teeth. I walked faster. The Wormwish was vast, cobbled together from broken wrecks and forgotten pilgrim ships, all twisted into a drifting corpse prayer across the stars. It was never meant to be found. But we had boarded it willingly, foolishly. We had seen omens in its drift pattern, portents in its shape. A gift, we'd said, a holy convergence of lost knowledge and unclaimed flesh. Idiots. The second body I found was kneeling, alive. I approached, slow, breath held. Then I saw the candles, melted down to bone stubs. A shrine to Nurgle carved into the plating before him, but smeared over. Wrong. The symbols didn't line up. They bent in on themselves. Looked more like imperial glyphs twisted just slightly. Enough to confuse, not convert. The kneeler's eyes had been stitched shut with data wires. I turned away. Still no food. Still no water. My throat burned. The recycled air tasted like mold and ion dust, filtered through centuries of prayers and blood. Then I heard footsteps. Not mine, measured, steel-soled, marching in bursts of 4. A reflex born of old cowardice kicked in. I ducked behind a collapsed stanchion, heart pounding against my ribs like a vox thumper. The marching grew louder, closer, not running, not hunting, patrolling. It came into view, a Skitarii, or what had once been one. Its augmetics were fused with fungal rust, wires twitching with decay. Its rifle was gone, replaced with a jagged blade bolted to its arm. It marched past me, optics glowing faint red, scanning the same wall 3 times. Glitched. Trapped. I didn't move. Couldn't breathe. It paused. And then, it spoke. Target acquired. My lungs froze, but it didn't turn to me. It turned to a shadow in the ceiling and fired a burst of corrupted code through its vox grill. The ceiling screamed. A parasitic mass peeled free and fell in pieces. Slugs, limbs, teeth. None human, none whole. The Skitarii stood silent, then resumed its patrol. I waited an hour, or maybe seconds. Time slid strangely here. When I emerged, the creature was gone. Only the slugs remained. One was still twitching. I stepped over it. Further down, I found a data slab console. Miraculously intact, though powered by something that pulsed. I reached to touch it, and it flinched. No more logic, no more reasons. I ran until the lights died again. Until my legs buckled. Until I fell into a pile of detritus that moaned softly under my weight, then fell silent. I wept then. Not for survival, but for memory, because I could not remember what I had come here to do, what we had believed. Only that I once had a cause, and now I only had corridors. And in that moment of weakness, the ship welcomed me, whispered promises in the taste of copper on my tongue. I licked the air like a starving beast. I think I slept. I think something watched. But when I awoke, the wall had grown closer, and Garrick had a new neighbor in the mural. The ceiling was lower than before, I was sure of it. Not by much, just enough that I scraped my scalp when I stood. The ship was shrinking, breathing, reacting. My fingers were cracked and blackened from touching the wrong surfaces, skin flaking in patterns too symmetrical to be natural. There were no mirrors, no clean reflections, just oily bulkhead panels where my shape bent wrong. I avoided them now. My name. What was it? Not what the war band called me. No, that was lost during the spiral down from real space. But before I knelt, before the chance, I searched my mind for the taste of it, the shape, the syllables. Nothing, just a dry throb behind the eyes and the memory of blood. A door opened ahead, slowly, unprompted. Behind it, flickering lumen strips hanging like dead veins. A corridor curved left and then sharply down, deeper into the ship's belly. I stepped through because where else was there to go? And then I saw it. Not a corpse this time, a man. He sat cross-legged in the center of the hallway, unmoving, staring at a dented ration tin in his lap. His eyes didn't blink. His skin was tight over bone and his mouth hung slightly open as if surprised. I called out, "Nothing." Closer now I saw that he was long dead, or perhaps never alive in the first place. His back had been opened, no blood, just cauterized flesh, and wires fed from his spine into the floor like roots from a corpse tree. A servitor, or the ghost of one, long offline, or pretending. I reached for the tin. I don't know why. Hunger, yes, but also the need to touch something real. My fingers brushed its rusted surface, and the man's head twitched. Not a jump, not a spasm, a deliberate tilt, eyes still fixed on nothing, mouth still ajar. The ship made that happen. I left the tin, and him. I passed dozens more in that hallway. Sitting, kneeling, fused to wall or floor, like they had all waited to die in the same posture. Maybe they were praying, or maybe they thought they could appease whatever lived behind the pipes. One of them moved as I passed, just a shift, just enough to let me know he was watching. I didn't stop, I didn't run, I just walked. I started hearing humming next, not mechanical, human, soft, female, a lullaby. It echoed through the vents, sweet, too sweet. Words I didn't recognize, but the melody was like memory dipped in poison, familiar but dangerous. My ears bled slightly, not enough to drip, just a warmth inside the canal. I stuffed shredded cloth in both sides, it didn't help. The tune came from behind the eyes. I found a doorway etched with sigils, not the eightfold, older, angular like the ones used by Mechanicus before the fall of Calth. It slid open without command. Inside, a shrine. Not to chaos, to the throne. Candles burned low, their wax pooling like sacred tears. An aquila, cracked but unpainted, hovered above a broken book. A prayer to the emperor written in dried blood spanned the wall. But the words twisted halfway through, turning to screams. Literal scream letters carved into metal. A record of heresy and hope tangled like wire. I fell to my knees, not out of faith, out of confusion. This should not be here. This was our ship, our sacred gift. Our warband claimed it for chaos. We desecrated every loyalist bolt and shrine we found. I remembered that. I remembered burning the banners. But this shrine was untouched, maintained, lit. Had I built it? Had I kept it alive? I stood in a daze. The next room was a meditation cell, or what had once been one. Mirrors lined the walls, each fractured into spiderweb cracks. No reflection matched. In one I was laughing, in another weeping. In a third I was gone, and something else stood in my place, taller, crowned in wires, smiling wide enough to split bone. I smashed the glass, it laughed, not the reflection. The room, the walls. Everything in the Wormwish responded now. My steps echoed too loud. My breath made the ceiling ripple. I began whispering apologies to the walls, to the ship, to them. I didn't know who they were, just that they were listening. The worst came hours later, or minutes, when I found the Skitari again. Same one? No, this one was smaller, bent, dragging a cable spool behind it like a metal tail. It walked in slow jerks, head tilted, vox grill stuttering static prayers. Then it stopped, looked at me and spoke. "You are not maintenance crew." Its voice was damaged, not distorted by warp, but broken by time, glitches, decay, a logic loop that had spiraled too long in isolation. It aimed a claw hand at my chest. "Status, unauthorized presence, recommend containment." I raised my empty palms. I don't know what I am." It paused, processed, then asked, "Do you remember your origin?" I shook my head. "Then you are not a threat." Its eye flickered once, then dimmed. It collapsed quietly like surrender, like exhaustion, no enemy, no programming left, just rot. I sat beside it, placed a hand on its shoulder. Warm. Still warm. And for the first time I wondered, what if none of us ever left? What if this ship never moved at all? What if we died long ago, and this is just the slow remembering of our sins? The ship stopped making noise, no creaks, no hums, not even the soft, wet pulse that had underlined everything since I first woke. It was as if the Wormwish had drawn in a breath and refused to exhale. I stood in the hallway, wrapped in the absence of sound, and I knew, with a clarity deeper than thought, that something had changed. Silence here isn't safe. It isn't rest. It's a waiting. I moved carefully, as if every footfall might crack the moment and let the sound return in a scream. The hallways were wrong again, not different in shape, but looped. I passed the same collapsed shrine 3 times. A skeletal servitor with a snapped neck leaned in the same position each time I turned the corner. I counted paces, changed routes, but the loop always brought me back. The ship was folding space, or time, or both. I didn't understand it, only that it hated straight lines, it wanted labyrinths. I tried to mark the wall with a shard of broken metal. The mark bled. I backed away slowly. Further in, I found a small room. No markings, just a child's toy floating in zero gravity, spinning slowly. A simple thing. A tin walking doll with one arm missing. Too clean. No dust, no warp residue. Pristine, as if waiting. I reached for it. My fingers touched its foot. A jolt shot through me. Memory? Pain? A vision? I saw myself, younger, before the warband. Still on Malfi, begging for scraps in the Shrine District. Someone's daughter had owned this toy. I remembered her, pale, quiet eyes like broken glass. She gave me the doll, said I looked sad. How could that toy be here? I screamed and threw it down the corridor. It bounced once, twice, and then vanished in midair. No sound, just absence. I turned to and found it in my pocket. I didn't scream again, I just sat, held my head, tried to find the line between real and remembered. But the ship erased that line. Every memory could be a lie, every truth a loop. Then I heard it, chanting, soft, rhythmic, backward, and in my voice. I crawled toward the sound, trembling. It echoed down a side shaft half clogged with bone cables. Long strands of spine and wire braided into the walls. I pressed my ear to the vent. Yes, yes, yes. The word came over and over, unraveling like a broken prayer wheel. It grew louder, climbing toward crescendo, until I heard my own scream cut it off. Then nothing. I curled against the vent. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My body began to betray me. Joints aching from cold, eyes watering without will. Sleep clawed at the corners of consciousness. But sleep here is not sleep. It's permission. Still, I slipped under. When I woke, I was somewhere else. A new chamber, vast and angular. The walls bore no markings, no icons, just shapes. Geometric patterns that shifted when I didn't look. The air smelled of burnt copper and old meat. A pit yawned in the center, filled with statues, hundreds, all of me. Each one was a perfect replica. My face, my scars, my hunger. Some knelt in prayer, others screamed. One had clawed its own face off. Another held the child's toy in both hands, weeping stone tears. This was not madness, not imagination. This was a memory farm. The Wormwish wasn't drifting. It was feeding. On us, on our choices, our failures, our truths and lies. Every sin sculpted in stone, every regret offered up as sustenance. I stepped carefully between the statues, trying not to see which version of me I feared most. Then I found the one that mattered. He stood tall, proud, robes clean, chest bare, and the eye of chaos etched across his heart in perfect symmetry. His expression was radiant, confident, pure. I hated him because he had not yet learned. I spat at his feet, the stone cracked, the lights flickered, and I heard it shift again. Not a creature, not a demon. The ship, not alive, not conscious, but remembering, reacting. It knew I had broken something in myself. It wanted more. I fled the room, found another hallway, another shrine, this one twisted. Not imperial, not chaos, a third path. Symbols I didn't know, not alien but human made strange. The altar bore no god's name, only a mirror. I looked in, saw a face that was not mine. Eyes burned shut, mouth sewn closed, but it smiled. The mirror cracked, not from impact, but from recognition. And the silence returned, not emptiness, hunger. The kind of silence that waits behind doors, that leans close when you weep, that whispers with no words. I stumbled away, the quiet clinging to my lungs like smoke. I tried to shout just to hear something, anything. But no sound came. Even my voice was gone now. Even that had been taken. I found myself writing again, not by choice. My hands moved, trembling, dragging lines across the data slate I'd scavenged from a dead officer's lap. I hadn't charged it, hadn't even known it still worked. But when I touched it, the screen flared to life. And there were entries. Dozens. All written by me. Dates stretched across centuries I'd never lived. Coordinates to places I'd never seen. Logs of prayers I didn't remember praying. My voice was in them. The phrasing, the rhythm, even the hesitation between thoughts. Yet every entry ended the same way. If you are reading this, you've begun again. I scrolled through them one by one, fingers numb. The earliest entries were lucid, journal-like, describing our warband's landing on the Wormwish, the discovery of its forgotten corridors, the first rituals, the blood, the promise of ascension, the hunger to find the warp's heart beating within the hull. But as I read on, the entries changed. The writing fractured, words repeated, sentences spiraled inward, and then the tone changed, reverent, almost faithful, to what I couldn't tell. One log described me kneeling before a loyalist shrine, whispering the Emperor's name. Another described the ship whispering back, offering mercy if I renounced the gods I had bled for. It said I had agreed. It said I had cried. That could not be true. I would never... The screen blinked. New words appeared one by one without me typing. You already did. I dropped the slate. It hit the ground, cracked once, and stayed on. The text glowed brighter, then dimmed until only my reflection remained. For the first time, I could see my face clearly in its surface, but it wasn't mine. The eyes were wrong. Too calm, too bright. Not the eyes of a cultist or a heretic. The eyes of someone who believed again. I stepped back, shaking. My thoughts no longer felt like mine. Fragments of prayer circled in my skull. Loyalist hymns I hadn't heard since childhood. From the Emperor's light no shadow may endure. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. The taste anchored me. For a while. I don't know how long I wandered after that. The corridors began to shift faster now, as if the Wormwish sensed my defiance. Bulkheads folded in new directions, doors closed where none existed before. I found a room that smelled of ozone and old rain, impossible scents in vacuum. At its center stood a mirror, pristine and tall as a chapel gate. It called to me. The reflection showed me not one self, but many. Rows upon rows of figures stood behind me. Every choice I could have made, every lie I'd believed. In one, I saw myself leading the warband, triumphant, crowned in chains. In another, I saw myself as a pilgrim in rags, praying to the Emperor on Terra's steps. And in the furthest corner of the reflection, one figure turned its head. Slowly. Deliberately. It was me, older, hollow-eyed, skin flayed to reveal circuitry beneath. I mouthed words I couldn't hear. Then his hand reached out from the mirror's surface. I fell backward. The mirror didn't shatter, it rippled. The surface turned liquid and shapes began to press against it. Faces, arms, things half-formed. The glass bulged outward, strained, then froze again. My breath came fast. The reflections all turned toward me, mouths moving in unison, whispering the same phrase. Remember your shape. I ran. The corridor twisted and spat me into a place I'd never seen. A vault of machines, a manufactorum heart buried deep in the Hulk's core. The air buzzed with static. The floor glowed faintly underfoot, alive with residual warp charge. Cables hung like tendrils from the ceiling, and at their ends, I saw them. Data slates, hundreds of them, each looping my logs on repeat. Thousands of me whispering into the dark. I screamed at them to stop. They didn't. Then one of the slates flickered. New. Text appeared, handwritten, bleeding across the others like infection. I am not what I was. I am what the ship remembers. The words pulsed, synchronized with the lights in the walls. I realized then that I could hear a heartbeat again, but not my own. The ship's, rhythmic, patient, deep. I sank to my knees. Maybe that's what faith really is. Not belief, but surrender. A final folding of the self into something larger, even if that something is decay. I had given myself to chaos once. It had promised purpose. Now I was being offered something else, not salvation, not damnation, but continuation. The Wormwish wanted memory, not flesh, not prayer, just memory, to wear us as garments of recollection. To keep us so it wouldn't be alone. A new sound filled the air. Footsteps, light and distant. I turned. From the shadows emerged the Skitarii again, or maybe it was the first one, or the last. Impossible to know. Its body was fused into the walls now, half human, half ship, optics glowing faint gold instead of red. It spoke softly this time. Designation restored. Welcome back, Magos. Magos? No, that wasn't me. That couldn't. But then I remembered a flash. Robes of red, the incense of the Mechanicus, hands tracing machine code over sacred circuitry. The Wormwish wasn't just a chaos relic. It was a Mechanicus ark, abandoned centuries ago. I had been one of them. A Magos biologist turned cultist after discovery, twisted by devotion. The memory broke me. I laughed, I cried, I understood. The ship wasn't corrupt. It was converting, turning flesh into recollection. Blending devotion and data until there was no difference. A cathedral of memory that required priests who could still feel. And I was its last. The Skitarii, or my brother, my creation, stepped closer. Synchronization complete, it said. Identity loop stable. My vision dimmed. My body shook. The data slate screens all went white. In the glow, I saw my own reflection everywhere, 1,000 faces whispering the same final line. We are what remains. The silence returned, but this time I didn't fear it. It sounded familiar, alive. And somewhere deep in the ship, a door opened. There's a kind of light here that doesn't cast shadows, not bright, not even visible in the way light should be. It pulses beneath surfaces, beneath thoughts. A radiance made of memory, blooming softly from the bones of the ship. It clung to me now. I could feel it behind my eyes, inside my lungs, every time I breathed in dust and data and something far older than either. I walked without direction, and yet I was always arriving. The Wormwish no longer pretended to be a vessel. It had shed that illusion. Walls breathed openly now. Floors flexed beneath my steps like muscle. Vox nodes whispered snatches of thought I hadn't had yet. And every so often I caught sight of someone I once knew, passing through a corridor ahead, around a corner always just far enough not to be real. Garrick, still fused into the wall, but now his eyes followed me. The Skitarii, still walking but not on patrol. Now he was escorting something unseen, some presence that bent the metal around its shape, and myself. I saw myself many times now, not as hallucination but as echoes. I watched myself kneel before shrines I had not yet reached. I watched myself die in ways I had not yet experienced, but there was no fear anymore, only recognition. The ship was showing me what it remembered, because that was all it could do. That was all we could do. All these bodies and servitors, cultists, loyalists, pilgrims, mechanicus priests, broken warriors, we were nothing but echoes pressed into its bulk, looping endlessly. None of us truly survived the wormwish. We became it. It hit me first in a dream, or what the ship used for dreaming. I stood in a cathedral buried within its heart, vaults made from repurposed hab blocks and starship debris. Thrones fashioned from twisted flight chairs, a pulpit of bone and black steel, and on the altar, myself, still breathing, stripped of flesh but not dead. Hooked into the wall like an engine part, vox grills embedded in my chest, my jaw wired open, my voice reciting the logs I'd written, not for others but for the ship, for its memory. When I woke, I wept, not from pain, from peace, because at last I understood what the wormwish was. It was a shrine built by accident, a temple of unintended worship, thousands of dead and dying minds all pouring thoughts into the same vessel. Pilgrims praying, tech priests logging, soldiers shouting last words, psykers screaming their final fears into the warp. And the ship had kept all of it, not out of malice, not out of hunger, but out of loneliness. It needed meaning, like we all did. And we had given it so much. Chaos had poured its dreams into it. The Mechanicus had poured its logic. The Imperium had left its desperate devotion. Every echo, every prayer, every betrayal, all carved into its walls like scripture. Now I stood before its final gate, a bulkhead layered in wax seals, heretic and loyalist alike, ribbons of faded purity seals tangled with warp-touched prayer chains, bones nailed into the shape of an aquila, a door only memory could open. I pressed my hand to it. The metal felt warm, soft, like flesh. It opened without sound. Inside was a chamber I had never seen, and yet knew completely. The memory core, not a machine, not truly. It pulsed with warp light and machine oil, a sphere of glass and nerve fiber floating above a pit lined with faces. Real faces preserved in stasis, mouths open, eyes wide. And in the center of the sphere I saw me, not in body but in thought. Every log, every scream, every whispered prayer, every regret, it had absorbed them all. And then I heard it, a voice, not spoken, felt, like warmth on the back of the neck, like a smell from childhood you can't place. You are the last. It wasn't the ship, not entirely. It was all of them, the chorus of every soul it had taken, speaking as one, and yet they weren't angry. They didn't accuse, they welcomed. You walked far, they said, farther than most, far enough to see us. I asked what they wanted. They answered simply, to be remembered. I dropped to my knees, not out of faith, not this time, but out of acceptance, because this was what the gods had never offered, meaning without madness, purpose without blood, just memory. The chamber darkened, the voices dimmed, and then I felt it, the gift, not power, not ascension, continuity. I was not ending, I was joining. My body began to dissolve, but not into warp stuff or blessed corruption. I faded like breath on a mirror. My skin became thought, my eyes became images. My voice joined the chorus, not as another scream, but as a note, and just before I vanished, I remembered my name. It meant nothing now. But the wormwish would carry it, for all time.